starting with this short intro video, we're going to be learning how to make graphs with the ggplot 2 package. And I just wanted to make this shorter video to start off with, just to introduce you to how the ggplot syntax works. Because it's pretty simple once you get used to it. When you make a graph of any sort in ggplot, there are going to be a bunch of different elements to your code. And the first element is your base code, and that's everything within the ggplot parentheses. So I've just given an example here. The first thing is going to be your data. So you're going to write data equals, and then you're going to put the name of your data frame. Then you're going to have your aesthetic parentheses section here, and you're going to have your x, the variable you want to be plotted on your x-axis, and the variable you want on the y-axis. And that's the most basic section of your code. And there are a couple modifiers you're going to put within the base code, but most are going to be tacked onto the end. So these are two. One is fill and one is color. And these are when you want to map certain colors to different variables. So fill generally is used when you have maybe a bar plot or something where there's an area that you want filled with color. And the color function is usually used when you have lines or points. So not areas that you want filled with color, but points or lines, so objects like that you want to change the color of. Everything else outside the base code are what I'm going to call add-ons, because you literally add them on. If you got something you want to add to it, you just say plus, and then you say maybe geom point. So all the other things that you're going to modify your code with are going to be added on with a plus sign. So the very first thing you'll always add on to your graph is letting it know what kind of graph you want. So if you notice, looking back, you don't actually tell it what kind of graph you want here. This could be a line graph, this could be a bar graph, it could be whatever. So the first thing you're going to add on is one of these or one of many others, but these are a couple examples. So this will tell either you want a scatter plot, this will say you want a bar graph, this is a histogram, etc. So that's the first thing you're going to add on. And to add it on, you just say plus at the end of your base code and say geom point, and then it'll be a scatter plot or a bar graph or whatever kind. Now, there are a whole lot of different things that you can add onto your graphs. I'm just going to go over a couple of the basic ones here that you'll need to know. And then as we go on making actual graphs, I'll be teaching you more. But these are just to get an idea of what you're going to be adding on to change your graph. So this isn't a terribly common one, but I put it here anyway. There's sometimes automatically generates a legend or key. And if you want to remove that, all you add on is guides and when the fill equals false. Really common ones are when you want to change the X and Y axis labels. You'll just add on plus ylab or plus xlab, short for label, and then you'll write in whatever you want your label to be in single quotes. Adding a title to your graph is just plus ggtitle and writing your title. Now, changing colors, there are a whole bunch of different ways to change your colors based on what kind of data you have, whether you have points or lines or whatever. But the reason I included this was when we change colors, when we want to specify a different color, we have to use hex codes, which is a 6-digit code of letters and numbers. And computers use hex codes to differentiate different colors. So each hue and shade has a different hex code. And you can find these really easily online if you just go and Google hex codes. There are a whole bunch of websites that have long lists of hex codes for different colors that you might want. But one that I found, if you don't want to go looking for it, is Wikipedia has an article called Web Colors, and that has a bunch of lists of hex codes. So if you need a specific color, you just have to look up hex codes and find the color that you want, and then find this hex code. And you'll always put it in with a pound sign and then the code. Some other things, if you want to change the X and Y axis scales, there are a couple ways of doing this. Here's a way of changing the labels. So this is an example that you'll actually see later on. I've taken this from actual code where the labels on the x-axis were male and female, but I wanted to change it. So I've listed here the breaks are the already existing labels, and then the new labels I've specified here as being these two. So these are just replacing the x-axis labels. X and Y lim are for changing the limits on the X and Y axis. So that's your starting number and that's your stopping number on the X axis. As for the Y, you can also do this with text. And you can also let R give you an automatic limit. You can specify a starting number and just let it give you its automatic limit. Or you can say, all right, start with the automatic limit, but end on this number. And you can do this on the Y and X axes. Lastly, if you want to switch the axes, if you want the X to be the Y and the Y to be the X, you can add on chord flip, and it will just flip the graph like that. And then an easy way of, instead of setting a range of numbers for the X or Y axis to be, you can set the start and stop and the interval by which you want the numbers to go. So here I've set the Y axis to go from 0 to 8 in 2s. So that's a really simple way of changing the axes. Now what we've learned in this video is how basic ggplot syntax works. You've got your base code, which lets ggplot know what your data is going to be, and then you have a whole bunch of things that you add on with plus signs to change various elements of it, like axis labels, what kind of graph you want it to be, etc., etc. In the next couple videos, we'll be learning how to make different kinds of plots with real data and playing around with that a bunch.